They coldly said, "You should be grateful we still allow you to visit. Think about it for a moment. Allowed to visit." The house I had scrimped and saved my whole life to buy, the home where I raised them, the walls that witnessed every warm Christmas morning, every scraped knee I bandaged myself, every tear I gently wiped away. I am Patricia Witmore, 72 years old. For the past 3 years, I have lived in a modest apartment in Portland, Oregon. Meanwhile, my own home, the 4-bedroom craftsman mansion on Maple Street, that my late husband Daniel and I bought in 1978, was occupied by my daughter Veronica and her husband Keith. But before I tell you about my journey to reclaim what is rightfully mine, I need you to understand how I lost it in the first place. Hello, everyone. Please leave a comment letting me know where you started following this story. I find great comfort in knowing I'm not alone in this world, that somewhere out there, someone understands what it feels like when the children you sacrificed everything to raise turn into strangers, seeing you as nothing more than a nuisance. This story began 5 years ago, though the seeds of tragedy had been sown long before. Daniel died in March 2020 at the age of 67, suddenly from a severe heart attack while tending our garden. We had been married for 46 years. He was my whole world. And when he was gone, the silence in the house became unbearable. Veronica was our only child. We had wanted more children, but after several painful miscarriages, we poured all our remaining love into her. Dance lessons, piano lessons, expensive private school, and college tuition. We gave her the best of everything. Daniel worked 2 shifts at the docks for 15 years to pay for her education. I took nighttime sewing jobs after my day shift at the library. She graduated without a single debt, married Keith, a prominent corporate lawyer, and they built a perfect life in Seattle. My 2 grandchildren, Brandon and Ashley, angels I loved from the moment they were born. After Daniel's death, loneliness felt like it was crushing me. The house was too big, too quiet, and filled with ghosts of memories. Sometimes I suddenly realize I've set out 2 plates on the dining table, forgetting for a moment that I'm now alone. Veronica called me one evening in late 2020. "Mum, Keith and I have talked it over. We're worried about you being all alone in that big house. What if you fall? What if something happens and nobody knows about it for days?" Her concern sounded so genuine. It warmed something that had long since cooled inside me. "We have a proposal," she continued. "Keith's company is opening a new office in Portland. We'll move there, live with you, and take care of everything. You won't have to worry about maintenance, gardening, or loneliness anymore, and Brandon and Ashley will be able to really be close to Grandma." I should have seen through the scheme right then. I should have wondered why she didn't ask me to move in with them, why my house had suddenly become the ideal solution for their family. But at the time I was drowning in grief, loneliness, and a burning desire to feel needed again. "We'll pay all the bills and living expenses," Keith added, his voice cutting into the phone. "You just stay there, enjoy your old age with your grandchildren. We'll take care of everything else." It sounded like a godsend, but in reality it was a perfect trap. They moved in January 2021. Initially, everything went incredibly well. Brandon, then 14, would sit beside me every evening, attentively listening to my stories about his late grandfather. Ashley, 12, would help me bake cookies using Daniel's mother's family recipe. Veronica seemed genuinely happy to be home, and Keith was always polite, even quite good at pleasing others. But the little things started to change in a frightening way. "Mom, we need to use the master bedroom," Veronica said about 2 weeks after they moved in. Keith has chronic back pain, and your bed has an adjustable mattress. Please bear with us. We've tidied up the guest room. It's actually quite cozy. That guest room was only half the size of the old one, facing the noisy, busy street, instead of the quiet garden Daniel had meticulously tended for decades, but I reassured myself it was only temporary. I told myself that family requires compromise. Then the guest room was invaded. "Patricia, the kids need space to set up their gaming setup," Keith explained one Saturday morning. "We're moving some of your things down to the basement, just temporarily, until we find a better arrangement." My grandmother's rocking chair was tossed down the dark stairs. The console table, handcrafted by Daniel himself from raw wood, was removed. Our wedding photo in its ornate silver frame was taken down and replaced with a huge flat-screen TV I never wanted. "This is our house too, Mom," Veronica grumbled when I weakly protested. "We all have to learn to adapt." But it wasn't their house, it was mine. They should be living with me, not trying to erase my existence. The kitchen was the next target. The cooking schedule I'd maintained for the past 50 years was completely turned upside down. Keith wanted dinner at 8 o'clock instead of 6. Veronica put away all my cherished pots and pans in favor of her modern kitchenware. The shelves I'd meticulously labeled and organized were emptied without a word of explanation. "I'm trying to establish a structured routine for the kids," she explained. "Consistency is important." But what about my routine? Where did my consistency go? I started to feel like a freeloader in my own home. I woke up to find Keith sprawled out in Daniel's study, which he'd arbitrarily turned into his personal space without consulting me. He'd even added a lock to the door. "Confidential client files," he said with the quirky smile of a lawyer. "I believe you'll understand, Mom." I went downstairs and found my favorite armchair occupied, the television blaring programs I hadn't chosen, and all conversation immediately silenced the moment I entered the room. "Mom, we're having a family talk," Veronica would say, emphasizing the word family, in a way that deliberately excluded me. After 6 months, I realized I was eating dinner alone almost every day. They fed the kids earlier, and then Keith and Veronica would have their romantic dates in the dining room, a place I was no longer welcome to enter. "You said you preferred to eat earlier, didn't you? We only want what's best for you," Veronica said nonchalantly when I brought it up. The bills started arriving specifically for me around the 8th month. Despite Keith's promise to pay, I found myself paying out of pocket for cable TV I didn't watch, internet speed I didn't use, and an expensive lawn care service, one that replaced the devoted old gardener Daniel had hired for years, with an industrial company that had uprooted all the delicate seedlings he had so carefully planted. "Oh, we thought you'd want to contribute a little," Keith said. "After all, you're still the one in this house." The phrase, "still in this house," pierced my heart like a sharp thorn. The real pain came with the photographs. I spent weeks after Daniel's death meticulously creating commemorative albums. 46 years of marriage, meticulously documented, milestone by milestone. The San Francisco honeymoon, Veronica's birth, her first days at school, Daniel patiently teaching her to ride a bike, the family trips to Crater Lake, and even his retirement party. I cherished them all, neatly arranged on a shelf in my old bedroom, now Veronica and Keith's. One afternoon, I needed to get my blood pressure medication, which I'd accidentally left on their bedside table while cleaning. I knocked but got no answer, so I pushed the door open. The photo albums were gone. I found Veronica in the kitchen. "Honey, where are the photo albums? The ones on the shelf in the bedroom?" She didn't even look up from her phone. Oh, those. They took up too much space. I packed them up and threw them in the attic. The attic? My voice trembled. Those are my memories, my whole life with your father. Mum, you're overreacting again. They're safe. You can climb up and look at them whenever you like. But I couldn't. The attic could only be accessed by a vertical ladder, and an old woman like me could never safely climb it. She knew that. Keith knew that. Those photo albums were as good as gone. Could you bring them down for me? I pleaded. Sure, when I have time. I'm swamped with work this week. She never had the time. Not that week, not the next, and certainly not the month after that. My wedding photo was gone from the hallway. Ashley needed that frame for a school project, Veronica explained. The precious photo itself was nowhere to be seen. Daniel's favourite leather armchair, the one he'd saved up for months to buy, had been donated to Goodwill. It's so worn out, Mum. It's an eyesore. It wasn't worn out. It was just slightly frayed, incredibly comfortable, and still faintly smelled of his aftershave. I used to sit in it every morning with my coffee to feel him so close. I should have asked you, I whispered through my tears. We're trying to modernize our living space, Keith interjected condescendingly. You'll get used to it. Daniel's mother's china cabinet, the one she'd brought from Vermont in 1945, had been moved to the garage. It's only temporary, they promised. It sat there until a leak in the corrugated iron roof let rainwater in, completely destroying half of the precious porcelain inside. It was just an accident. Keith shrugged nonchalantly when I discovered it. What good is insurance? Except he never filed a claim, and those priceless, irreplaceable heirlooms ended up in the trash. I began to see what was really going on. They weren't just taking over my living space, they were erasing Daniel's existence, they were wiping out our history. They were turning my house into theirs, piece by piece, memory by memory. I tried to speak frankly with Veronica one evening when Keith was working late. Honey, I'm feeling left out, I began cautiously. This is still Mum's house, and she would be very grateful if you asked her opinion before changing anything or throwing anything away. Her face suddenly hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Mum, we had to give up our whole lives in Seattle to move here to take care of you. We lost our house. Keith had to accept a pay cut. At least you should have been flexible with the things. I never asked you to give up anything, I said, my voice choked. Yes, you didn't ask. You just used your loneliness to force us to feel guilty, she snapped. That statement pierced my heart more painfully than anything in the world. My friends began to notice my disappearance before I even realized it myself. Carol Jennings, my best friend of 30 years, called one Tuesday morning. Pat, we've missed you at the book club again for 3 months straight. Are you okay? Was I okay? I couldn't even remember the last time I'd stepped outside to do something I enjoyed. Veronica needs me to babysit, I'd replied, though I wasn't entirely sure if that was true. That excuse had become an automatic reflex. Every Tuesday, for 3 months. Carol's suspicion was evident on the other end of the line. Patricia, what's really going on? I wanted to cry and tell her everything, about how I'd become invisible in my own home, about my family's book nights, movie nights, and lavish dinner parties I'd never been invited to, about how I'd once asked to play games with them, and Veronica had flatly refused. Mum, I don't like it. We're playing grown-up games, as if I hadn't been an adult before that brat even opened her eyes. But saying that truth would be a humiliating admission that I'd made a terrible mistake, like admitting I'd completely lost control of my life. I'm just a little tired lately, I lied. I'll definitely join next time. But I couldn't, because as soon as I mentioned it to Veronica, she immediately scheduled Brandon's dental appointment for that exact time and told me to drive him there. Both Keith and I have important meetings, she explained. You wouldn't mind helping us, would you? What could I say? They were doing me a favor by living with me, or at least that's what I was constantly being told. My other activities also disappeared one by one. My weekly volunteer shift at the library, where I had dedicated 23 years before retiring, suddenly conflicted with Ashley's soccer game schedule, which I was forced to attend to cheer him on. Regardless of whether Veronica and Keith were there, my presence was somehow still obligatory. My monthly lunch with my church friends was dismissed. At your age, driving that far is dangerous, Mum. What if something happens? I was only 70 years old that year, perfectly capable of driving a 15-minute drive to a restaurant. But Keith had already started making sarcastic remarks about my reaction time, eyesight, and my senility about confusing the gas and brake pedals. It wasn't a funny joke. It was a blatant fabrication. The walls were closing in, but so slowly that I didn't realize it until I was completely trapped. Then there was the matter of my car. I owned a 2015 Toyota Camry, running perfectly and long paid off. One morning, I woke up to find it gone from the driveway. "Where's Mum's car?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from trembling with fear. "Oh, Keith took it to the repair shop," Veronica said nonchalantly. "The engine fault light came on." It wasn't. I'd just driven it around the day before. The car was returned 2 days later with a list of repairs totaling $3,800. Keith had unilaterally approved the repairs before even asking me. "You're lucky you found out in time," he said. "The mechanics said you were driving a mobile coffin. I had just had that car serviced 3 months ago. Everything was perfect, but I still had to grudgingly pay the bill because what else could I do?" 2 weeks later, Keith suggested I use their second car instead. "We hardly ever drive it, so you don't have to worry about the hassle of car maintenance." My car was gone again, and this time for good. "We sold it," Veronica admitted a few months later. "You weren't going anywhere anyway. The money from the car sale was never deposited into my account." Money from the car sale. The transition from discomfort to unbearable occurred on Thanksgiving 2023. I spent 3 grueling days preparing a traditional feast in Daniel's style. Roast turkey with herb stuffing using my mother's recipe, homemade cranberry sauce, mashed sweet potatoes topped with walnuts, and Daniel's favorite pumpkin pie. The kitchen was filled with the scent of the happy holiday seasons we'd been through. Veronica's in-laws, Keith's parents, Robert and Diane, were visiting from California. I'd only met them twice before, at Brandon's graduation and Ashley's initiation. They were quite polite, though Diane's scrutinizing gaze made me feel like an exhibit. I set the table with the best porcelain left from the warehouse disaster, lit candles, arranged fresh flowers from the garden, and used Daniel's mother's linen napkins that I'd carefully preserved for special occasions. Everyone gathered at 4 p.m. I'd been in the kitchen since dawn. "Dinner's ready," I announced proudly as I brought the steaming turkey to the table. Just then, Keith rose from the head of the table, Daniel's place, where he'd sat for the past 40 years at every holiday meal, and raised his glass of wine. "Before we begin, I want to thank Veronica for opening the doors of her house to welcome the family this year. Her house, not our house, not Mom's house, but hers." I stood there frozen, oven mitts still on, staring as everyone toasted my daughter for hosting Thanksgiving in my house, with food I had cooked myself. "Mom, sit down," Veronica said, pointing to the chair at the far end of the table. Not next to her, not my usual seat beside Daniel, but in the far corner, squeezed between Brandon and the cold wall. Robert began carving the turkey. Daniel's job used to be my job after his death. Now, suddenly, it had become his. Diane showered Veronica with compliments on the lavish table setting. "Thank you, Auntie," Veronica said, taking credit, never once admitting that I was the one who had done it. The conversation at the table revolved around me as if I were a lifeless statue. Keith rambled on about his latest lawsuit. Robert talked about his yacht club. Diane mentioned their upcoming trip to Alaska. "You two should come with us," she said to Veronica and Keith. "We'd love for the whole family to come." I was clearly not part of that whole family. Veronica's eyes lit up. "That sounds wonderful, Auntie, but we can't leave Mom alone for 2 weeks. "Oh, I'm sure she'll manage on her own," Diane said dismissively, waving her hand dismissively. "She's lived alone before." "Actually, I've been thinking about it," Keith interrupted, setting down his fork. "Patricia, perhaps it's time we discussed some changes." The table fell silent. All eyes turned to me. "Changes?" I stammered. "Mom's getting older. This house is too much of a burden for her alone. Veronica and I have been shouldering most of the responsibility, both financially and physically. It's becoming exhausting." "Exhausting? Am I a burden to them?" "We think it's time for Mom to consider other, more suitable living options," Keith continued, his lawyer-like tone smooth and frighteningly methodical. "Somewhere more suitable for Mom's needs. There are some really great upscale nursing homes around here." My hands began to tremble. You want me to move out of my own home?" "It's not about wanting or not wanting, Mom," Veronica quickly interjected. "It's about what's practical and best for everyone." If you're feeling what I was going through at that moment, the suffocating betrayal, the utter helplessness, please subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything to me, and it gives me the strength to share the stories so many of us are silently enduring in the shadows. "Best for everyone," I repeated, my voice a weak whisper. "Or best for you?" Keith's eyes immediately hardened. "I think we should discuss this privately, Veronica. Your mother is starting to get agitated again." "Agitated? As if I had no right to express my emotions while being kicked out of my own home by the very children I gave birth to." "No," I said, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "If you want to decide my future, you have to say it to my face." Robert cleared his throat awkwardly. Diane suddenly seemed very interested in the mashed sweet potatoes in front of her. The children had slipped into the living room, whether by accident or design, I don't know. "Mom, we've sacrificed so much to come here," Veronica said loudly. "Keith's career has been severely affected by the job transfer. We've had to give up all our social and community connections in Seattle. We did all of that for you." "I never asked you to do this," I repeated, this time louder. "You volunteered. You said you wanted to help. You wanted to be close to me. Not once, not a single one of you mentioned that I would have to pay for that help by giving up my house." "Giving up is too heavy a word," Keith interjected. "We're talking about a natural transfer. You'll sell this house, split the proceeds, and use your share to buy a small apartment or go to a healthcare support center. I don't need anyone to help me with care. I'm only 72, not 92. But you will need it eventually," Veronica pressed. "And property prices are very high right now. If we delay too long, you won't get a good price. And then what will you do?" Their reasoning sounded perfectly reasonable and logical, but beneath the surface I understood perfectly well what they were trying to say. "We want to divide the inheritance now. We're tired of waiting for you to die." "This house isn't for sale," I said firmly. Keith glanced at Veronica with a meaningful look I couldn't decipher. Patricia, be rational. I can't manage this place all by myself. I'm not alone. You're all here, remember? Taking care of everything as you promised. That arrangement is no longer feasible, Keith said, his lawyer nature fully revealed. Financial pressure, tight deadlines, the matter. The first week after Thanksgiving, the atmosphere in the house was as cold as the harsh winter outside. Veronica refused to speak to me unless absolutely necessary. Keith treated me like a ghost, as if I didn't exist. The children, sensitive to the extreme tension, also actively avoided me completely. I spent most of my time confined to my small living room, now my prison, frantically searching online for information about nursing homes because I wanted to understand what they were plotting to put me in. The costs completely overwhelmed me. $3,000 to $5,000 a month for the most basic apartments, and much more expensive with additional medical services. My Social Security and pension combined were $4,200 a month. After paying for a nursing home, I would have nothing left. Meanwhile, my house, a house I legally own with no mortgages, is worth about $700,000 on the Portland real estate market. Sell it, split the money, they'll pocket $350,000. I'll keep $350,000 to throw into a nursing home, and that money will vanish in less than 6 years. And then what? I'll be a penniless old lady, completely dependent on their pity, exactly the position they want to put me in. I was lost in thought, my eyes glued to my computer screen, when I suddenly heard voices coming from downstairs. Keith's office door was open. A rare occurrence, as he always kept it locked, and he was on a video conference. "That property is entirely in her name alone," his voice boomed. "That's the crucial point. But given her age and increasing senility, we have every reason to seek conservatorship." My blood froze. "She's showing signs of dementia and is no longer capable of sound financial management," he continued. I nearly burst out laughing at his shamelessness. I'd never made a single wrong financial decision in my life. I'd saved enough to own this house outright and maintain a very comfortable retirement. I've documented a few specific cases. We'll need a formal medical assessment, but I'm absolutely confident I can prove she's incapacitated. Conservatorship. They were planning to make me legally incapacitated. I'd read about this in the newspapers. Family members used the law to strip an elderly person of all control over their finances and life decisions. It happens all the time, often under the guise of concern for their health, but sometimes, like in this case, it's blatant financial exploitation disguised as filial piety. They'll control all my assets. They can sell my house without my consent. They can decide where I live, how my money is spent. I'll be reduced to a child before the law, completely powerless and without any authority over my own life. I grabbed my bag, put on my coat, and slipped out of the house as quietly as possible. Carol opened the door immediately after my frantic knocking. "Pat, I was just thinking, oh my God, what's wrong with you?" All the resentment and humiliation accumulated over the past 3 years poured out like a raging torrent. 3 years of humiliation, isolation, and psychological manipulation. The ultimatum on Thanksgiving night, and the plot to strip me of my citizenship through guardianship that I had just overheard. He listened intently without interruption, his face growing darker with each detail I recounted. "They're trying to steal your house," Carol declared bluntly as soon as I finished my story. "But they're my family," I weakly protested, though I myself no longer believed in the word family. "No, my dear friend, family never does such dirty tricks. Only thieves do that. Thieves may be educated and patient, but they are still robbers by nature. He made coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, the familiar table that had witnessed so many of our joys and sorrows over the years. "What other options do I have?" I asked in despair. "Well, you could sit back and wait for them to file for guardianship, and then fight it in court, but that would be incredibly expensive, mentally exhausting, and there's no guarantee you'd win. Or," he paused, his eyes flashing with determination, "or you could take the initiative and defeat them in their own game." "How?" "You own the house. You have every right to kick them out. You have..." The next morning, I called Margaret Chen, a seasoned lawyer I'd known since my days volunteering at the library. She was the one who'd helped me with Daniel's inheritance proceedings and had always been incredibly straightforward and trustworthy. "Patricia, tell me the whole truth," she said the moment I walked into her office. And I did. 3 years of humiliation compressed into 30 minutes, a wealth of documentary evidence. I started documenting emails, threatening text messages, actual bills paid despite Keith's promises to cover them, even shady car repair bills, everything I could gather. Margaret's jaw tightened as she sifted through the documents. "This is elder abuse and financial manipulation, a textbook case. Did they actually apply for guardianship of me? They can try, but you're perfectly lucid and fully capable of managing your personal affairs. There's no sign of cognitive decline whatsoever. Any judge would see through this dirty scheme, especially with the documentation proving their financial manipulation." She tapped her fingers on the stack of papers. "But the court process will be hell for you. Expensive, an invasion of privacy, and incredibly stressful. It's best to make it pointless." "How?" "Evict them from the house. A formal and legal eviction order. They're currently just temporary residents on a monthly basis in your house. You never signed any rental agreement with them, did you?" "That's right. They just moved in. Then you just need to send them a notice to vacate within 60 days. Oregon state law is very clear. You don't need to give a reason. It's your legal property." My hands trembled slightly again. "They'll fight back fiercely. They'll make things extremely bad. Certainly, but the law is on your side. And Patricia, there's something else you should consider." She leaned forward, her eyes serious. "Sell that house, not to share with them. They have no legal rights to your property. Sell it to yourself. Take the money, buy a smaller apartment that truly belongs to you alone, and live the rest of your life free, out of their manipulation." "But Veronica always thought..." "Thought what?" "That she would definitely inherit your house. Patricia, inheritance is a gift, not a privilege. And gifts are only for those who deserve them with love and respect, not with manipulation and abuse." That idea both terrified and thrilled me. "Think about it," Margaret said. "In the meantime, I'll draft the eviction notice. 60 days from the date it's served, they must leave your house. What you do with the house after that is entirely yours." I only needed 10 seconds to think. "Draft it," I said decisively. The eviction notice was officially served to the house by a bailiff on December 15th, 2023. I wasn't there to witness it. Margaret advised me to stay at Carol's house for safety and to keep my spirits up, but Tom, Carol's son, who lived nearby, reported the whole thing afterward. Apparently, Keith opened the door, read the notice, and his face immediately turned a terrifying shade of purple that Tom described as looking like he was about to have a stroke. Veronica's frantic screams could be heard clearly from the main street. My phone exploded with hundreds of frantic calls and messages that I decided never to answer. Margaret had given me strict instructions. Absolutely no contact. Everything from now on will be handled by me. Don't give them any loopholes to exploit. The voicemails began with furious anger, then gradually shifted to desperate pleas. How could you treat us like this? We gave up everything for you. You're making a terrible mistake. Mom, please, let's sit down and talk things out. You're not thinking straight. That last message almost softened my heart. But then I immediately remembered Keith's cold voice during that phone call, when he calmly discussed turning me into a mentally incapacitated old woman, and my resolve became stronger than ever. They had 60 days to pack up, and I began to pursue my own plans. In January, while Veronica and Keith were frantically searching for a new place to live, I listed the house for sale through a reputable real estate agent recommended by Margaret. The market was fiercely competitive. We received 3 offers within a week, all exceeding the asking price. I accepted the highest offer, $745,000. Veronica discovered this when she saw the agent's lockbox hanging on the front door. She called me directly, ignoring all of Margaret's warnings. Mom, please, can we just meet and talk in person? Despite Margaret's objections and my own rationality, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop. A neutral location. She looked terrible, gaunt with deep dark circles under her eyes and matted, unwashed hair. A part of me, the maternal part that can never die, immediately wanted to hug her and comfort her. Mom, I'm sorry, she sobbed as soon as she sat down. We handled things so wrong. Keith was too hasty and pressured you. I should have stood up for you instead of blindly going along with him. Yes, you should have. Please don't sell the house, Mom. Please, we'll move out immediately. We'll give you back your space. We'll do whatever you want us to do. Just don't sell the house. It's my inheritance. It's supposed to be Brandon and Ashley's future. It's my house, Veronica, not your obvious inheritance. Mine. But Dad will surely want it. Shut up! My voice trailed off with anger. You have no right to drag your father into this and tell him what he wants. How horrified Daniel would be if he saw how you've treated your mother. He worked himself to exhaustion to give you the best opportunities in life. And this is how you repay him? By trying to steal his widow's property? We didn't steal, we were just trying to manage. You're trying to manage to get me out of your own life. I slammed my coffee cup down on the table, sending dark liquid splashing onto the tablecloth. You took over my bedroom, stole my belongings, stole my car, buried every memory of your father. You isolated me from my friends. You turned me into a shameful burden in my own home, and then you conspired to make me mentally ill, incapacitated, so you could legitimately seize all my property. The girl's face turned pale. Mom, did you hear about that? I heard everything. Keith discussed legal guardianship, as if I were already a lifeless corpse in a coffin. That's not it. He's just exploring options to take away my autonomy and all my property. Don't use flowery words to cover up your despicable actions, Veronica. The girl buried her face in her hands and sobbed, her mascara smudged all over her face. So what do you want me to do? What do I have to do to fix this mistake? Nothing. You can't fix anything anymore. The house will officially be handed over in March. You have until February 14th to get out of there. Where are we supposed to go? We can't afford the expensive rent in Portland, and we can't save enough for a down payment on a new house. You're the wife of a famous lawyer, and you have a huge trust fund from your in-laws. Figure it out yourself. But that fund is for our children's college education. Well, I guess you'll have to learn to make sacrifices like your father and I did. Get a second job. Cut back on living expenses. Use your creativity. I stood up, preparing to leave. You wanted to be adults and make adult decisions to determine my life, didn't you? Now go ahead and decide your own lives. Mom, please. One more thing. I turned back, my gaze sharp as a razor. The items you arbitrarily stored away, the commemorative Daniel armchair you donated, the wedding photo you lost. I want a detailed breakdown of the cost of each item. Lawyer Margaret will contact you directly to handle the compensation for damages. Are you going to sue us? I'm reclaiming what you stole. There's a huge difference here. I strode straight out of the cafe without looking back. The official handover of the house was completed on March 22nd, 2024. The $745,000, after deducting brokerage fees and other taxes and charges, left me with a net worth of over $700,000. A huge sum of money I never dreamed I'd own all at once in my lifetime. Veronica, Keith, and the children had to move into a dilapidated rented house in Beaverton in mid-February. They were only allowed to take what they legally owned. All my mementos that they had thrown away or given away without my consent were meticulously catalogued by Lawyer Margaret for damages, and I received a check for $18,000 in damages from them, compensation for the value of Daniel's armchair, my grandmother's damaged heirloom porcelain, and other items. This wasn't about money at all. It was about legal recognition, about making them legally and financially admit that they had been involved in stealing things that didn't belong to them. I bought myself a lovely little 2-bedroom house in Ashland, Oregon. Small, just the right size, with a beautiful garden for me to tend, and a perfect front porch for enjoying my morning coffee. It cost $300,000, leaving me with $400,000 safely and intelligently invested for my future. For the first time in years, I felt truly safe, free, and protected. Carol came to help me clean out my new house, along with a few old friends from the book club I'd reconnected with. We hung a large portrait of Daniel in the most prominent spot in the middle of the living room. I placed my grandmother's rocking chair, an item I'd paid $200 to buy back from the second-hand shop, right by the large window overlooking the garden. Every photograph I'd rescued from the dark attic, every fragment of memory they'd once tried to bury, now found a place of honor in my new home. Brandon called once, a brief call. "Grandma, I really don't understand why you did that to our family." "Maybe someday you will, son," I gently told him. "When you get old and someone you love treats you like a nuisance instead of a human being." Ashley sent me a letter, the envelope still on my desk, unopened. Maybe someday I'll open it, or maybe never. And as for Veronica and Keith, only silence, complete and absolute silence. And guess what? I'm perfectly comfortable with it. I turned 73 this year. My days are filled with meaningful joys, volunteering at the Ashland Library, attending art performances at the theatre, hosting a book club for my friends right in my little house, and tending to the garden where I planted those vibrant roses in memory of Daniel. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness thinking about what I've lost. My motherly relationship with my only daughter, the grandchildren I love so dearly, but can no longer be in their lives, the dream of a warm, close-knit family in my old age. But then I immediately think about what I've regained. My self-respect, my right to self-determination and absolute peace of mind. This story doesn't have a perfect fairy tale ending. I didn't reconcile with Veronica in a tearful, fake reunion. I didn't get my old family back. There are betrayals that are too deeply ingrained in one's blood to be easily forgiven with mere words. What I regained was far more valuable than that. I regained myself. To anyone following this story, those who are suffering and feeling small and powerless in their own lives, those who are being psychologically manipulated by family members, those who consider your inheritance a self-serving privilege they have the right to control. Please remember this. You deserve respect, you deserve dignity, and you have every right to live your remaining years in your own way, not according to their self-serving arrangements. Inheritance should be earned with genuine love and filial piety, not through scheming and financial abuse. I am Patricia Witmore. I am 73 years old, and I sold the house they were certain to inherit. And I have never slept so soundly. Thank you all for listening to my life story. To anyone reading these words, perhaps also experiencing bitterness, feeling invisible and insignificant in their own lives, or being manipulated by relatives, those who see your inheritance as a foregone conclusion, they have the right to decide. Please remember this. You deserve respect. You have the right to maintain your dignity as a human being, and you absolutely deserve to live your twilight years in a way you are most proud of, not according to anyone's calculated arrangements. Inheritance is a reward forged from love, filial piety, and genuine respect, not something to be coerced or demanded through abusive schemes. I am Patricia Witmore. I am 73 years old, and I sold the house they were so certain they would take it. Now, in this small house filled with sunlight and Daniel's presence, I have never slept so peacefully. My story ends here. From the bottom of my heart, I want to express my most sincere gratitude to all of you, the wonderful audience who took the time to listen, understand, and accompany me through each page of these ups and downs. Your presence, likes, and shared comments are a great comfort, helping an elderly person like me understand that I am not alone. If this story has touched your heart or given you strength to protect your own values, please support me by subscribing to the channel and sharing it with those who need to hear it. Let's spread the message of respect and true love within the family. Once again, thank you very much. I wish you peace, happiness, and to be cherished in your own home. Goodbye, and see you in the next story.